it was this moment of clarity, and I won't call it guilt, but I will call it reckoning, to be able to say, in my mind, I was portraying to my adult peers competence and intellect and perseverance and tenacity and scholarship. But to my daughter, who didn't care about any of those things, I was telegraphing stress, mopiness, intimidation, insecurity, and all of these other things. The only picture that she saw was a dad whose head was buried in a book, who was constantly grasping for a brass ring that she could not define and, quite frankly, didn't care about.
Welcome to Waking Up to Life with Rabbi Josh, a podcast built around conversations with people in our community who have found a bit of enlightenment in their lives. While these moments we'll be speaking about today may not seem life-changing, I think that the conversation will reveal how these moments have shaped the way my guest sees the world. It's an informal conversation with insights from Jewish tradition, and it may just as well change your life. And if not, it's just 18 minutes with me. So l'chaim, to life. Today on our show, we are so excited to welcome my dear friend, Reverend Steve Norman, who is a speaker and a writer in residence at Winning at Home, which is a faith-based coaching and counseling organization out of Grand Rapids, Michigan. Steve, welcome to the show.
Rabbi Josh, thank you so much for having me. It's truly a pleasure.
So, Pastor or Reverend Norman, or Steve as I call him, and I have known each other for many years, from the days when he was here in the Detroit area and was one of the leadership team at a church in Troy, Michigan. And we got to know each other through our mutual work in the faith community. But today, I have the wonderful opportunity to share my friend with all of you as he helps us learn from a story that changed his life with regard to parenting his daughter. So Steve, tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, thanks so much, Josh. You and I have had a chance to kind of watch one another parent from afar via many a shared afternoon at the turf fields at Ultimate Soccer over there in Pontiac. And we've got Kelly and I have been married for almost 20 years. We've got 4 children. Grace is 16, Naomi is 14, Josiah is 12, and Miriam is 10. And about, 8 years ago now, I was wrapping up my doctoral studies at a graduate school out in California, and I was doing it via distance. So I was trying to figure out how to be a husband, how to be a dad, how to be a graduate student, how to be a functioning member of society, and all those plates were spinning at the same time. And for the life of me, I was just barely holding the whole thing together with chewing gum and Scotch tape. And I finally crossed the line and got my doctorate. And in my mind, Josh, I'm like, well, this is it. All of the pieces are going to fall together now. Like I have this milestone, I have this piece of paper, I have these letters that I can throw up after my name. And so now all of my insecurities are going to fade away, and all of my professional dreams are going to come true. And everything is just going to fall perfectly into place. And I will never forget the congratulations card that my daughter, Grace, who would have been almost 10 at the time, gave me. She goes, "Dad, now that you're done with your doctorate, you can look less like this." And she drew a picture of Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. And if you don't know anything about Winnie the Pooh stories, like, Eeyore is a constant downer. Like, he doesn't have anything good to say about anything. Like, a cloud follows him everywhere he goes. And she said, "Dad, you can be less like this." She drew a picture of Eeyore, and she goes, "And you can look more like this." And she drew a picture of Tigger, who is the counterpart, the antithesis, the guy who's like always bubbly, always bouncy, always excited about everything. And Josh, I kid you not, like, this wave of horror washed over me, because I went, "Oh no." Like, this is how my precious oldest curly-haired, wide-eyed daughter has seen me. Maybe not perpetually, but at least in part for the last 5 years. And it was this moment of clarity, and I won't call it guilt, but I will call it reckoning, to be able to say, in my mind, I was portraying to my adult peers competence and intellect and perseverance and tenacity and scholarship. But to my daughter, who didn't care about any of those things, I was telegraphing stress, mopiness, intimidation, insecurity, and all of these other things. The only picture that she saw was a dad whose head was buried in a book, who was constantly grasping for a brass ring that she could not define and, quite frankly, didn't care about.
And the honesty in that moment is powerful and transformative, I assume. So what was your reaction? What happened next?
Yeah, so I think that I just had to, I had to, I laughed. I cried a little bit on the inside. I gave her a hug. I tried to receive the gift that she had intended in that moment, right? I didn't try to spin into an existential crisis when all she was trying to give me was like a hug and a congratulations, you know? So we had cake, we celebrated that moment. And I just tried to pull her aside and hug her and thank you for her support that, again, she couldn't fully appreciate, both direct and indirect, for getting me across that finish line. But Josh, it reminded me of something that I would learn again later as a parent on the sideline of a soccer field. I remember telling a dad when we were being like physically threatened by a dad on the other side of the pitch, and both of us were struggling to maintain our sense of cool. And I remember telling this other father, I go, hey, whether we like it or not, we are always parenting. We are always parenting, whether we're doing it consciously or unconsciously. Like, if we think that there is any part of our life that our children, whether they are 2, 12, or 25, aren't watching, um, we're deluded.
And there's so much research out there about imprinting in those earliest years of parenting. But what you're saying, in effect, is that the imprint that we leave on our children doesn't end just in those earliest months or years as we raise them. They're watching us, they're seeing us, and I think mirroring back to us messages so that they then imprint on us. So my question for you is, what is the imprint that your daughter and that experience have left on you that lingers, that you carry now? What's the message that you would share from that moment?
Yeah, I think the message to me, and Josh, I'm glad we're having this conversation because I need to be reminded of this again today. It's a lesson I can forget all too quickly. Is that at the end of the day, the only thing that really does matter is our relationships. Like, all of the achievements, all of the accolades, all of the wealth, all the trinkets that we can accumulate, like, at the end of the day, none of them hold a candle to the relationships and the health of those relationships that we have, especially with our nearest and dearest circle, which is our family, but also with our peers and our friends and our fellow worshipers. And it is very easy to lose sight of that. And COVID's compounded that in some ways because we haven't had access either to the achievements or to the relationships. And it's been a good refining moment for me. It's been a good distilling season to come back to those core elements and say, yep, the relationships matter. And there's a verse, there's a quote in our tradition that says, you could, be careful of the mindset that allows you to think that you can gain the whole world and forfeit your soul. And I guess the parallel or the corollary for me is like, what if I gain the whole world financially, personally, professionally, and yet forfeit a trusting and honest and joy nurturing relationship with my precious children? Would that have been worth it? And the answer is a thousand times no.
So you open the door a little bit, and although I'm a rabbi, you're a pastor, and this is a Jewish podcast connected to
Sure.
the number 18 or Chai. But I want to know, let's dive into it. Let's really go head on. What
Sure.
does your faith tradition say? What would Jesus say to you as a leader of Christians about this subject matter? What's the real message from Christian faith?
It's great. We were just talking about this as a family last night. Jesus says, unless you become like a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And I think the things that we love about children is that they're unassuming. They're filled with innocence and they're filled with wonder. It's not until we get later in life where our insecurities and maybe our greed or our own woundedness gets the better of us, and we, whether we're doing it on purpose or on accident, spend a lot of our time and energy self-promoting and self-protecting. Children who are too young to have been kind of beaten up by life, they're not self-protecting. They come into every moment, as Brene Brown says, wholehearted. Like they haven't been eaten or bitten by the shame monster just yet. And so they come with wonder and joy and glee and openness and confidence and humanity into every moment. And Jesus goes, that's what I want for you. I want you, for you to come into all of your days with wonder, all of your days with trust, all of your days with hope. And if you get too much into your own head, or you get too devoted to building your own empire or your own brand, you will miss out on the gifts that I'm trying to give you in this moment. And again, it's no accident that we're having this conversation, because we were just having this exact moment over dinner as a family last night.
Well, and isn't it the same that our shared tradition from the prophetic voice says, the old shall dream dreams, the youth shall see visions, right? There is something about the wisdom of age that gets mixed in with the innocence of youth and the ability to dream out of moments of challenge that I think drives us. I've been thinking about it a lot, and we've been talking about it in terms of the silver linings of the pandemic, right?
Sure.
We talk about what's missing in our kids' lives. We talk about everything that has been hurt and taken away from us. And yet there is something innocent about watching children who are simply living it and moving forward.
Right.
And understanding
Right.
that relationships matter. One of the things I did during the pandemic was take the course called The Science of Well-Being from Yale University, free course offered by Professor Laurie Santos. She talks about happiness. And one of the great takeaways is that it is not things that make us happy, right? We think they're going to make us happy, that new car, that new piece of clothing, but ultimately it is relationships and experiences with other people that I think make the real difference in your life. So go back, you've now had several years since that 10-year-old moment with your daughter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you name an experience that changed for you? Like, how are you dealing with your kids, your wife, even your friends differently now because of that moment?
Yeah, I think that it's trying to draw, and I'm glad that you're using the verbiage of moment, but at the risk of sounding trite, it's being able to be fully present in that moment, because that moment is all we have. And I think that sometimes we go to our scheming and our planning and our 5-year plan and our 10-year plan and our retirement plan and the college plan and all the plans, the plans. And we forget that in the language of Ecclesiastes, that there's a time to plan, but there's also a time to step back from the plan. There's a time to save and there's a time to spend. You know the passage upside down and backwards, and I think that for me, the gift that God has given me is the moments that we have with our kids while we have them, because those moments are numbered. Are numbers that are moments that we should relish in and be fully present towards. I remember a, a deep friend and mentor said that one of the challenges of technology is that parents who are constantly scrolling through their phones, she said this, she goes, partial attention communicates partial value.
Hmm.
And I think that one of the things that I've learned since then is that if I'm listening to my kid with one ear, it's very easy for them to view that as listening with no ears. And I've had, probably more moments than I want to admit, where my kids have asked me a question and I've been looking at sports scores or checking emails and I didn't hear them. I'm like, hey, can you repeat that? And some of them have actually gotten to the point where they're like, no, I can't and I won't. Like
I,
that, the window's closed. You lost it.
And I think this is the real challenge of this world of technology and what's happening next. We have to find, and you used the term reckoning earlier, we have to have
Yep.
a reckoning moment with how we address information. I think education has to change in the way we understand that kids have access to everything. We have access
Sure.
to everything in the palm of our hand. I
Sure.
want to return, though, for a moment to Ecclesiastes, because you mentioned that it's one of my favorite passages. And one of the pieces of that passage that has resonated with me over the last couple of months is the line that says, there's a time for embracing others and a time for being alone.
Yeah,
we've experienced that aloneness, and I believe that we are creatures of connection, and that
yeah,
we need to return to embracing others. And I don't mean that in an anti-mask wearing way. I
sure,
mean that
sure.
in a spiritual reclaiming of real relationships, speaking to people, being with people, as you said, engaging head on. And even though this is wonderful to be with you by virtual reality here, I want to
Sure.
be in your space. I want to learn with you. I want to connect to you as a human being. There's so much more that we can see if we really connect with people head on.
Yeah. And again, maybe I think that in a month or in a decade, we'll look back and say the pandemic was a gift because it stripped away all of this. It stripped away all the scaffolding. There wasn't sports events. There was to watch. There wasn't sports events to attend. There weren't sports events to play. There weren't concerts. There wasn't anything. And so we actually had to say, like, am I going to self medicate and just stream whatever, or am I going to take an internal look and say, all right, God, in some weird way, this season, though none of us would have chosen it, is a gift. What do you want me to receive from it? What do I need to learn about you? What do I need to learn about myself? And how do I become more fully engaged with the people that you put in my sphere?
Absolutely. Let me ask you, earlier in your career, you spent time engaging as a pastor in a congregational setting.
Yeah.
Are things different for you now that you're working in more of a coaching, speaking, writing place? Do you feel a disconnect from people because of that?
I I do and I don't, Josh. I think that because I still get to preach and teach at churches on a regular basis, I still do am able to have conversations with people. Either they'll ask me questions online or they'll engage me immediately during the service. One example is I was preaching at a church in Wisconsin, and they stream their services on a tape delay to a local correctional facility.
Hmm.
So I got a letter from an inmate who said, "Hey, I heard you speak. I've got some questions about these things." And we haven't been super regular, but we have gone back and forth a few times. In fact, I probably owe him another letter tomorrow. But in some ways, I'm getting have a freedom to go outside of the geographical limits of one particular congregation. I'm getting exposed to a lot of different people. Now I don't get to go deep with people, but I do get to go wide. And so, in some ways, I'm very grateful for the variety. I think that every time I visit a new place, I get stretched. I learn something from the fiber of that congregation, and I've been in geographic and different states and different socioeconomic environments that are always stretching for me to be able to say there are people who live in a part of the world that I don't live in and won't always understand, but it's good for me to break bread with them. It's good for me to be in their space. I feel like it's stretching my sense of humility, my appetite to learn, and then also my capacity for empathy, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And the joke is that you are an expert if you come from the next town over. So you get to be an expert in all of these places as the stranger coming to preach on a Sunday morning. So I
Hey,
think
a,
that's cool.
a prophet has no honor in his own land, right?
That's
So,
exactly right. Well, I will say to you that you are always welcome on the east side of the state, and you are always welcome to be my teacher. I feel lucky to have you as one of my friends. We're drawing towards the end of our conversation here, and a question that I've been asking everybody, having nothing to do with our conversation thus far, is there something that you're reading or something you're watching on Netflix right now that has given you some insight that's changed the way you're seeing the world?
I came across 20 minutes of a show the other week, couples therapy on Showtime, and I want to watch it. Kelly's not as enamored. She's like, these people are annoying. But for me, I love now that I'm a part of an organization that does marital counseling and is committed to helping people do mental health. I think it's fascinating to watch other couples process their issues because it reminds us how universal some of those struggles really are. I think that sometimes the greatest lie that many of us believe is that whether it's in our marriage or whether it's in our spiritual journey or whether it's our own psychological well-being, that our temptations or our shames or our challenges are uniquely ours. When in fact we're not alone. There are many other people who are on the other side of the wall or the other side of the hall or the other side of the street who are going through challenges that are very similar. That there are a few issues that are that are universal to the core of all humanity. And when we know that we're not alone, it gives us maybe courage to reveal our need and our vulnerability, and it gives us a sense of solidarity that there are other people who have walked this path. I can receive help and wisdom from them, and if there are people who are 2 or 4 or 9 steps behind me, maybe I can offer a helping hand to them.
Yeah, I will tell you, if you haven't watched it all, it's worth watching the entire miniseries, although
Okay.
it's a bit unsettling at times as you
Okay.
listen to these other, you feel like you're sort of in a place you're not really supposed to be listening. That's strange. I will recommend to you a book that I haven't read it yet, but I've heard also. There's a book called You Should Really Talk to Someone, also about
Okay.
that idea that it's okay to speak to somebody, it's okay to get some help, and know that there are powerful resources out there in the world, whether it's your pastor, your rabbi, your imam, or simply a counselor that you speak to. So I think that's a message that needs to be heard, especially in these challenging times. Well,
That's
I
really
am
great.
just so glad you've been with me today. So glad to offer a little bit of your insight to the world of the Jewish community, and I'm hopeful that maybe some of your community members will also see you and connect to the messaging that we're sharing. I feel lucky. I feel lucky to have you in my life. I feel lucky to be able to present this podcast with insightful moments from members of our community. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of you next time as you join us in the next episode of Waking Up to Life with Rabbi Josh. Until then, l'chaim.